Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Machikoro was a huge hit last year for Pandasaurus and IDW Games, enough that the designer and the artists of Machikoro have become sort of minor celebrities in the board gaming world, but they do have another game besides Machikoro. They have Diamonsters, or Diamonsters. I'm not entirely sure how you're supposed to say that. I'll say Diamonsters. This is just a simple trick-taking card game, so it's significantly different than Machikoro. You're playing numbered cards that have pictures of monsters, very cartoonish looking, where the wild things are type monsters from your hand, in an effort to take more monsters and try to match them up or get enough diamond symbols on them in order to win the round and take an actual little diamond, well, not an actual diamond, a facsimile of a diamond from the center of the table. And if you're the first person to get a certain number of those based on the number of players, you're going to win the game. Let's go ahead and take a brief look at how the game is played, then we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think. Okay, I'm going to give you a quick overview of Diamonsters. This is the competitive game for 2 to 6 players. The goal of the game is to acquire these little blue diamonds. The number that you need to win the game is determined by the number of players. So this is a 3-player setup and you need 4 diamonds. As soon as someone gets 4 diamonds in front of them, they win the game. Each player is going to start off with the same identical hand of 5 cards, numbered from 1 to 5. They have these cute pictures of monsters that look like they're from where the wild things are. And you have the 1, which has a picture of 2 diamonds on the bottom. You have the 2, which also has 2 diamonds. You have the 3, which has no diamonds on the bottom. The 4, which has 2 negative diamonds. And the 5, which only has 1 diamond. So everyone's going to have that same hand of cards no matter how many players there are. All the rest of the instances of those cards, 1 through 5, are going to be shuffled together and put into a deck for players to draw from. And then you'll put out the diamonds, keeping in mind how many diamonds you need to win. Then you're going to start. Now, the goal here is to take cards from the monster deck. So what you're going to do at the start is flip over the top card at the start of each round. And that is the card that everyone is bidding on. You want to build a monster collection. So you're going to take one of the cards from your hand. Let's just go ahead and, actually, I'll do it randomly for everybody. So there's the card that this player is going to play. Here's that player's card. And then he's just going to play this one. Then when everyone's selected, you flip them up and see what happens. Okay, now this would be an instance where a normal circumstance has taken place. It's always ideally, it is the highest numbered card that wins the trick. So we have 3, 4, and 5. The 5 wins. The 5 gets to take that card. So and plus, in addition to taking the card, you get to put the card that you use to win the hand or the trick in front of you together with that card. That is the start of your monster collection. Then the player who won gets to draw another card from the randomized deck. Then the other players who lost take their cards back into hand, and then you do it all over again. But there's a couple of other little rules that you need to keep track of. First and foremost, if more than one player plays the exact same card, then let's say that these were the cards that people played for this new one. We have a 3, and a 2. Well, the 3s beat the 2, but more than one player played the exact same card. Those cards cancel out. They go back to their players' hands. They are irrelevant. Now this player just won the trick and is able to put those 2 cards in front of him or her. The other special rule has to do with the 1 and the 5. The 1 is always treated as higher than the 5 if they are played on the same hand. So let's do another example. Okay. And, all right, so flip them over. Boom, boom, boom. Well, 5 beats everything else, so this is a 3. So the 5 is obviously going to take that other 5, but that is not the case because the 1 always beats the 5. It's therefore essentially treated as a 6, so that 1 is going to go ahead and take that. Now, if you were playing with 4 players or more players, and there was this instance where someone played a 5, and there you go, you have the 1 and the 5. The problem here would be if someone else had played their 5 at the same time, and those canceled out, then if the 1 is left up against any other number, it immediately loses because those 5s don't count anymore. They got removed from play. So that only happens if more than one player plays a 5 at the same time someone plays a 1. That can be problematic for the player who played the 1. Now you might be asking at this point, well, what is the point of taking all these cards in front of you? How do you actually get these diamonds? Your goal is to get a set of either 3 of the exact same monster or 5 diamonds printed on all the cards that you have in your monster collection. So if this player here had actually managed to get another blue number 5, they would immediately win the round and they would be able to take the diamond, and then you would start all over again, wipe everything out, and do it all over until someone gets to the prerequisite number of diamonds to win the game. Or, like I said, if you have 5 diamonds printed on all the monsters that you have, which is actually what this case is right here, because there's 2, 2, and 1, then that player also wins the round and gets to take a diamond. But do remember that the 4 has 2 negative diamonds on it, which makes it problematic for going through that route to victory. But that's really the game. It's very simple. You're just flipping over cards, trying to take the monster that's out there, trying to build a set before the other players do. It's a bit random, and you're always trying to outguess your opponent. Now, let's get to my final thoughts. And oh, one last thing, it is eminently possible that more than 2 players are, in fact, every player at the table, no matter how many players you have, plays the exact same card at the same time, meaning that they all cancel each other out. If that happens, the monster that would be put out there simply goes in the discard pile, everyone takes their cards back, and you do it again, and effectively cancels out the entire round. Alright, starting with the theme and components, there's no theme, it's just a very simple trick-taking game. As far as the components, first off, this box is way too big. I know that it's not that big, but for what's in the game, it's way too big, even though it looks very attractive. And speaking of that, the artwork is great. I really love, like I said in my intro, I compared it to Where the Wild Things Are. It's really, really well done. I like the graphic design, and it all works really well. Even the tiny little blue diamonds that they use are really cool. So that's all pretty solid there. As far as how the gameplay works, I was surprised by it. I liked it more than I thought I would because it actually had mixed reviews that I saw going into it. Essentially saying that it's very simple and there's very little decision making. And I can definitely see that. There are some clever things going on here. The fact that you all start with the same hand of cards, but then that changes over time. That's cool, and how if you play a card that is identical to the other players, they cancel each other out. So it does force you to have some critical thinking, and there is some strategy in the sense that you can look at what the trick is, what the card is that everyone is vying for out on the table. Look at what cards that the other players already have in front of them that they'll be trying to match up with to have the set of 3 or to have enough diamonds, and say, okay, what they're going to need to do to take this card is they're going to have to play one of these types of cards. So that gives you just a little bit of precognition as to what they're going to play, and you can play accordingly. So there is some strategy to be had here. Still, for most turns of the game and for most cards that you play, it's just going to be, I really hope that he doesn't play that card when you play your card down. So there's not a lot of critical thinking to be had here, but it is still very light. It is clever in some ways, and it is a bit fun. I will say that while it's very simple to learn, there are a couple of nebulous things with the rules, including it's not explicitly stated in the book what you're supposed to do, and I go over this in the overview, what you're supposed to do when you finish a round. Do you dump your entire hand and start all over as if from the beginning of the game with cards 1 through 5, or do you keep your hands, get rid of everything in front of you, and start over from there? That's kind of how we played it, and that's probably the best way to play it. Therefore, you have a decreasing amount of knowledge of what's in other players' hands, and if you're doing card counting, if you're really keeping track, you can still do a little bit of forecasting, but it's still not an easy thing to do. It's a clever game, it is light, it is fast, some people are really going to like it, it's going to be a great introductory trick-taking game for kids, I would say, but most people are not going to find enough bite there, no pun intended, for Diamonsters.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon, and make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.